Good evening, everybody. My name's E.R. Anderson. I'm the executive director of Karis Circle. Karis Circle is the nonprofit programming arm of Karis Books, and Karis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. We are so excited to start our programming with you in 2021. We have made it to 2021, and while our material circumstances have not really changed, our community is here, and we wanted to start this year off with this event in particular. We really thought about how do we want to bring our community together in 2021, and it was with this event for a very specific reason, which I'm sure y'all are going to understand as soon as these folks start talking. So I want to introduce everybody and welcome you all. I see folks are already saying hi in the comments, telling us where you're watching from. We love it. It's like old home week already. I see folks that we know. I see folks that Rebecca knows. So we're glad to have you continue to use the chat however you like. Please also know that you can ask a question by clicking on this Ask a Question button down here at the bottom of your screen at any point. It's not disruptive to put a question in there at any point. Similarly, you're going to want to buy What's Your Story? You're going to want to buy it for yourself and probably for friends. I think you might want to do a book group with it. So we already know actually some folks are doing some organized work around it. So you may want to organize that in your community. So just click this teal button and you'll be buying it from Karis Books and More and supporting us. So we are grateful to you for that. Before I introduce everybody, I want to thank our two co-hosts tonight. As always, we are loving working with the Auburn Avenue Research Library. The Auburn Avenue Research Library on African American culture and history is an incredible resource located in Atlanta, but really they work with folks around the world. They are physically closed because of the pandemic, but they are open online all the time. And we are really blessed to have a research librarian in the chat with us tonight. So you'll see they're going to be putting resources in the chat that are relevant to the conversation. You may feel like, oh, I want to go down all those rabbit holes, but don't be distracted. You can go back and visit all of those links at the end. The chat will stay up permanently. So you don't need to rush. You don't need to open all those windows. They'll be there. You don't have to do anything. You can even refer people back to it if you have a friend who you think would love to look at the resources. They're free. They're available. You don't need to rush and look at them. But we are really grateful to have those resources. It's really enhancing our conversation. We hope that you will also be sure to support the Auburn Avenue Research Library and remind the City Council how much we need our libraries. Our other sponsor tonight is the Lola, which is an incredible co-working space and really collaborative space for women that has been working as an amazing partner for us for over a year. They are a place where you can even during the pandemic go get your sort of fire refueled with like-minded people, get challenged, and if you're kind of needing a place to get your grounding, we really recommend checking out the Lola. So thank you to both of y'all for that. And I want to start out by introducing our MC, our hostess with the mostest tonight. And that's Vanessa Jackson. So Vanessa Jackson is a soul doula, psychotherapist, and owner of Healing Circles, Inc. in Atlanta, Georgia. She is also chief mixologist at Dudley's Apothecary, where she conjures aromatherapy sprays to support mind, body, and spirit healing. And she has made sprays for Karis, made sprays for me as an individual, and probably many of y'all in the community right now. We are very grateful for this specific support. Vanessa co-edited Understanding Power, an Imperative for Human Services. Vanessa's passion is supporting activists in creating healthy and balanced lives. She offers an activist assistance program to provide politically conscious and clinically sound counseling and healing workshops to Atlanta area feminist, queer, and social justice nonprofit organizations. And she is a member of the Radical Optimist Collective and a former member of the Karis Circle. So welcome.
Woo! That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Yes. And we are joined tonight by our two co-creators, really. I'm going to introduce Lily Diamond first. So Lily is a writer, educator, and advocate working to democratize wellness through storytelling, accessible practices for inner and outer nourishment, and revolutionary acts of self-care in relationship to our earth and human communities. Lily is author of the best-selling memoir cookbook, Kale and Caramel, Recipes for Body, Heart, and Table. And her work has been featured in the New York Times, Vice, Healthy-ish, Women's Review of Books, Refinery 29, and more. She lives in Maui, Hawaii, where she grew up on occupied Native Hawaiian land. You can learn more about her at her website, lilydiamond.com. And without further ado, want to introduce Rebecca Walker, who, Karis feels a very special kinship to you, Rebecca. We are always glad and honored to be here. I think your cousin BJ might be on the call, or at least we hope so. We know
I
she
got
got
all
some.
kinds of people out there. I can see them. Carolyn, Brenda, everybody. It's fantastic. It's like coming home. I'm so happy to be here with everybody.
Yes, we do. We always feel like it's old home week, and we treat you like a cousin at Karis, whether you know that or not. We're always rooting for you. So, for folks who don't know, Rebecca is a best-selling author, editor, and cultural critic who has contributed to the global conversation about race, gender, culture, and power for over 2 decades. She has spoken at over 400 universities, conferences, literary festivals, and corporate campuses around the world, and is a co-founder of the Third Wave Fund, an organization that supports women and transgender youth working for social justice. Rebecca has won many awards and was named by Time magazine as one of the most influential leaders of her generation. She lives in Los Angeles, and you can learn more about her at RebeccaWalker.com. So we cannot wait to just go ahead and dig in. So I'm gonna pop out of here and hand it over to Vanessa. But it's a real honor.
Before you pop, I want you to say for just a second, because one of the things I think is really important as we tell stories is to tell the stories of the places that hold us.
Yes.
And the one thing I want to do as we start this year is remembering and reminding ourselves of the work that you and Dartricia and Sarah and Angela hold this space for us all the time, oftentimes at great cost to yourself. And especially for you, when things were going down on Wednesday, all of a sudden, one of your posts pop up. And it is always balm for my heart. You have the right words at the right time. And I just want for us to take a moment to appreciate all that Karis does for all of us. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yes, 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 yes.
And so because words matter and stories matter and we matter, I really am interested in just imagining ourselves sitting in that beautiful Karis space that we can't quite get to right now. But to be able to have this conversation about your new book, which I love this book. I am telling all my clients to get this book. It allows me to do a transition because it's like, I think people can figure a lot out with this. So one is thank you, Lily and Rebecca, for the work. And so I want to jump in and talk about like especially in this political moment, in this social moment, what's your hope for how this journal is going to help us individually and collectively move through the sort of the destruction, the transition, and transformation that might be possible? So I'm just really curious about what your hopes are for this book.
Yes, yes. Should I start, Lily?
Yes, please.
Our hopes for this book. There are so many hopes for this book, but I think specifically in this particular moment when we've just experienced what we're now calling the 6th of January, we can call it an insurrection, a riot, an attempted coup, an orchestrated potential overthrow of our government by an authoritarian fascist leader. We can call it many different things. But I think in this moment, when we are all really trying to absorb and reckon with what is happening and what has happened, we really hope that this book can be a place for people to examine the stories that they have been holding about themselves, about their relationships with others, about their feelings about being an American, about being a citizen, about being a human being, so that they can begin to make space for a new story that is able to incorporate all of this new information that we're having to metabolize, you know, in the face of this moment. Who are we going to be, you know? Are we going to be apologists? Are we going to demand a certain level of accountability and truth because we understand that our story is inextricable from the American story, and that our freedom is inextricable from the freedom of others in this country? You know, so the book is really, it's broader than that. We're asking people to really look at their relationships with technology, with mortality, with their bodies, with their sexuality, and make space to write new stories. But I think in particular, specifically at this historical moment, we are really hoping that it can be a tool, it can support people as they try, as we all try to figure out how to rewrite the story of America and our own togetherness moving forward, in the face of this incredible moment of fragmentation and violence.
Thank you.
To build on that, I think that we assume that people come to this book often at a moment in their lives where they've recognized that the story that they have carried and told and held for themselves up to this point, for whatever reason and in whatever way, hasn't been working. Maybe parts of it have, but that there are ways in which the story that we've carried has limited us, has stunted us, and has kept us from new possibilities, new stories, new ideas about who we are and who we could be. I shared this in our conversation on Friday as well, but this past week, with the backdrop of this insurrection, I was looking at James Baldwin's work and this particular thought of his about white supremacy as the umbilical cord that keeps choking America each time America tries to rebirth itself. And that it is a story that is effectively deeply damaging, diluting, silencing, killing us over and over again, and has done so, since our country's inception. And so we can look at this book, What's Your Story, and all the different facets of its chapters that let us dig into different parts of our lives and our identities, and start to write a new story. But fundamentally, we get to this central and bigger question of how do we tell a story about ourselves, and as Rebecca said, about our relationship to this country that we're a part of, that doesn't, stunt us, that doesn't kill us, that actually brings us into new life.
Yeah.
And so that's one way I've been thinking about the book this week.
And I want to add that, especially being here at Caris and Charis. Caris. I go back and forth. I have a friend named Caris. I think anyway, being here, I always, whenever I'm here in this space, I'm thinking about Black women, and our stories. And I think that, the story of Black women in this country has been one of saving it again and again and again. And this recent moment, our story has been, making sure that Joe Biden is now the president-elect, that Kamala Harris is now the vice president-elect, we have provided the energy. Our story is to be the moral conscience of this country. And our story also, we know that story, but also I think what is emerging more and more as our story, as young people are taking over, as, all these different sort of beautiful blossomings of consciousness, our story is one of deep joy and deep beauty and deep creativity and deep vitality. And I think what's happening now and what we want to support with this book is to help create the space to uplift that story, that story that fills us up, that makes us feel full of energy and not exhaustion, that casts us in a story of redemption and endless creativity and vitality and the persistence of spirit that we have always brought to the table, and not just the story of the downtrodden mule of the world.
Yeah.
And so we are very much about that. and this space really is for that. I come to this space with that feeling and offering and sense of wanting to honor.
One of the things that thank you so much, because I think that's the part, like a full story, not a thin story. Like narrative therapy, we talk about a thin story about people's lives and all the multiple layers of the delightful part, the part that was hard, but it launched me into a new way of being. And so sometimes when I think about, like, when people ask us, like, questioning, can often be so fraught for us when we are being questioned. And yet the questions that y'all offer to us are questions that invite out so much possibility, so much love. And so when someone asks you, who do you think you are? Tone is everything.
Yes.
And so when someone says, who do you think you are? We all going to sort of be ready for something there. But to have an invitation to all of these questions about, who do I think I am? Who do you think you are? And how does this book help us unpack and imagine new possibilities? So I know that it took, in your description, 10 years, a decade to birth this, right?
Yes.
So I'd love to hear about the process of birthing this and curating these specific questions.
Sure. Lily, you want to talk a little bit?
Sure, yeah, I do. I also want to, before we move on completely from everything we said before, I just want to emphasize what Rebecca brought forth, this idea of accountability. Mm-hmm. And particularly, I think in this moment for white America and for white women in particular, to understand how they are looking at Black America, at Black women, at the incredible work being done in the country by Black women, to not become entranced by this narrative of Black women saving America, and instead come back to the understanding of what does it mean for white women to become accountable, to do the work, to follow up on the work that Black women have led, to support the work that Black women are doing, to uplift the work that Black women are doing, and to actually turn that into part of their own story, rather than relying on this narrative of all of the other ways that they could be disempowered and rely on people who have been oppressed to quote unquote save them. So I just, before we
thank you so much.
Moved on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
White
absolutely.
Work. Yes.
So this book came out of I guess 11, almost 12 years now. I walked into Rebecca's Art of Memoir masterclass, and I was at a very big transitional point in my own life, similar to Vanessa. You and I were talking a bit about the transitional point that you're in with your work. I was in a similar transitional point where I was grieving a tremendous amount. I had just experienced the loss of my mother. I was in my early 20s, and I was really at a juncture where I was ready to write a new story. And I also didn't quite yet understand the full scope of that. And so I came into Rebecca's Art of Memoir course, and at that point, I started studying with Rebecca, and we began to work together in a variety of ways. And over the next couple of years, this idea of taking this practice of asking questions and writing prompts, using writing prompts to excavate stories and to give people a space to be really deeply honest in a way that is often very, very difficult, which I'm sure, you know, you in the work that you've done in your life, you know what an incredible challenge that is. And so we started to bring together these sets of questions that would allow people to ask themselves, what is my story about the way that I see my body, my relationships, my work, my place in the world, mortality. And as we did that, for a couple of years, we sent out newsletters, and we always knew that it was going to take a larger form in a book. And so over the past 10 years, we worked on all of the various components that came together as What's Your Story? A Journal for Everyday Evolution. And it was also a matter of, for me, I can only speak for myself, those 10 years, you know, Rebecca and I are of different generations, different, you know, races. Our work is different. And for me, so much of these past 10 years has been a process of learning, of growing, of being a student, of you know, allowing the student-teacher relationship that Rebecca and I have to grow into one of collaboratorship, and of really my own doing the work of writing and rewriting my own story, you know, publishing the book that I wrote before, and then moving through, you know, what does it mean to answer all of these questions that we now have put into a book and asked all of you.
Right. I would add a little bit to that. So Lily came into my master class, which I'm going to be teaching again in March. If any of you are interested, I'd love to see you. And you know, I had decided to start to teach this class after writing 2 memoirs and many, many, many personal essays, and really coming to the understanding that my own growth and evolution as a human being was really fueled by the process of writing my story and envisioning a different outcome. So my first memoir, Black, White, and Jewish, was about growing up mixed race and feeling a kind of deep fragmentation and sort of psychological strain. And I realized that the only way I was going to get out of that would be to write myself out of it. And so what I did was I sort of documented every single moment of trauma and confusion that came out of my life till that point, that had been etched into my body and my mind. And by putting that all down on paper, I was able to look at the clear sheets of paper that followed and find a new way to be, you know, a new Rebecca. And, you know, I did the same thing with Baby Love, which was about growing up with a ideology that taught me that being a mother would be a kind of enslavement. And so I felt very resistant to motherhood. But in fact, I was called to be a mother. And I found it to be, even though it's very, very stressful and very, very difficult, and I understand every iota of why I was told all the things I was told, it was also a very empowering, expansive experience for me. And so again, writing Baby Love, that book, was about putting down the old story and working it through to make space for a new story. So one of sort of being silenced and minimized and smaller, to one of being bigger and finding a new way of relating to the whole idea of giving birth to another human being. And so my practice of doing that had evolved over many years, you know, and in addition, I've been a student of many different spiritual traditions, and really came to my position as a teacher of a master class in this work from having lived it for many, many years, and sort of creating this language of sort of gentle but focused probing, you know, careful, sort of questioning, going into people's minds, in a loving, supportive space, and asking them to really look at what was going on in there and share it with others, me, and then to work together in this process to sort of loosen the knots of those stories that they were holding. So when Lily came in, that was the work that I was doing. I felt called to do that work. I felt, I still do. It's the work that makes me happiest, to be in someone's process of transformation, in their process of creativity and imagination. And so when Lily came in, she was, as she said, really holding on to some stories. And one of the things I loved about her was that from the very beginning, I saw an openness to the work, and a real rigor and commitment to doing the work, and a sense that the story she was holding was not serving her anymore, and she wanted a new story. And so I think as a teacher, as many of you are teachers, and Lily is now a teacher, when you recognize a student who is ready and who has the capacity for growth, that's an incredible moment, and it's a joyous moment, because you realize that the thing that you've been cultivating for so long has a place to go and will survive. I think things that, as an African American woman, a woman of color who's a teacher, one of the things that many of us feel and talk about often is how much we want to make sure to give some of this to other women of color. And so there's been, that's something that I've thought a lot about, that the passing on of it to Lily as a white woman has been very interesting. I have Black students as well, but I've had to really interrogate in some ways what I have needed from her, in order to feel good about what we're doing together. And a lot of that is what she showed immediately, the understanding of the work that needed to be done, the openness, and then she does now, which is incredible work, anti-racist work, incredible work on behalf of Native peoples of Hawaii, and environmental justice, so that it becomes a matter of giving one's energy to others who are going to go out into the world and do the social justice work that you believe in, that your ancestors gave you. So out of all of that came this book, What's Your Story? So the prompts, the questions, the way it looks, the way it feels, our energy together has come out of this incredible relationship. And I think both of us, have had many years of sort of spiritual journeying, that also, and psychological. I mean, I've done every kind of thing you can imagine. So, and happy to have done it. So I think it comes out of all of that and more, and the magic dust of all of this, that we're
never forget the magic dust of it all. Because I think the other part of it, because that is a huge part of it. And I think, as I'm hearing you talking about all the multiple layers of it, and the choice making, and how you get changed in the co-creation process, I'm really interested when you talk about because there's a lot of questions here, and it's not so easy to engage these questions. Some of them you have to keep coming back to them. And so one of the questions that we have in the question section is, sort of what are the chapters that you found that people most need to rewrite most often? Like, what are the chapters where people really get caught and need more support and guidance?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Well, Lily.
No, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I think all of them have an element of intensity. It's a very intense book. It's not easy. I mean, our last interview we did a podcast, and she just kept saying, this is not your ordinary journal. This is not, so, I would say, and I've said this a few times now, but it's very, very true for me, that one of the most powerful chapters in the book asks questions about how you feel about death, about how you feel about your own mortality? Are you ready to die? What do you think about dying? How did you learn about death? What are the thoughts you hold about death? What does it mean to die a good death? I mean, really questions that I think many people are afraid of, or really need to be in conversation with others to kind of tease out, and really need to sit with themselves in deep meditation to answer. So I think those questions are very intense for people. I would say also, I think one of the chapters that I have, challenges with, and I've said this a couple of times again, we've been doing this, but I think it's relevant in every moment. And I think especially for this conversation with all my people out there, I think the chapter, and Lily will speak more to this, I'm sure, but the chapter about your relationship with the earth, with the environment, is one that takes a lot, because we are so disconnected from the earth so often in this culture. And we are so programmed with the story that it is ours to control, to ignore, to pillage, to extract from, to assume that it will always be there supporting us. And we really challenge that idea, And for me, as the story, and some of my people out there know this, my mother's story of the earth is one of incredible bounty, and her mother's, that I come from a line of Walker women who can grow, a eggplant this big, by breathing on the ground, and that is just a gift that we have. And my story coming into this moment has been that I don't have that somehow, and I don't have that relationship, and I don't resonate, and I have decided in the context of this that my new story about my relationship with the earth has to include this ancestral story, and wants to honor the ancestral power of that story. And so, I'm talking to my mom about growing a pot of collard greens, outside my studio door, start small, but I think those are some of the difficult, all of them are difficult questions. But as you can see, that's a couple. Lily, you want to add that?
Well, yeah, I think to me it's interesting, the going outside chapter, which is the chapter Rebecca's talking about, to me is also deeply linked to the in community chapter, which I feel drawn towards, because I feel like it asks really challenging questions to me about who I am in relationship to my community right now. And community for all of us is it's so charged right now, that idea. And there's so much polarization. And, we live at a time also amidst the pandemic when we are literally quite fearful of almost everyone that we encounter around us, because we don't know, that they might be vectors for a deadly virus. And so starting to understand some of, and dig into some of these questions around what communities am I a part of? What does it mean to me to belong? What does that feel like to belong? What does it sound like? What does it taste like? What are my, in what ways do I spend my time and energy that inform the communities that I am then sort of pledging myself to? My time, my energy, my money, my thoughts. How do my actions reflect my allegiance to those communities? And I think where this comes back to what Rebecca is talking about is that I think we often fail to think about ourselves in community with the earth, that we have a relationship to the earth that is as central and as vibrant as any relationship, or maybe not vibrant, but is certainly as central as any relationship that we have to any other human, that we cannot exist without the earth sustaining us. I think about the fact that water has become, it's a future now. It's being traded on Wall Street as a future. You can, hedge against people's suffering, basically people's future suffering and not having enough water. What does that mean about who we are and our distance from the earth community, and our sense of being completely divorced from having a deep connection to and accountability, right, to the earth? Who am I? What choices do I make every day that reflect the fact that I know my well-being is inextricable from that of every other being on this earth? And that includes, the elements, that includes the health of this planet. And, again, this is tied, of course, back to the hegemonic modes of being that we live in, to hypercapitalism, to white supremacy, to these ideologies that have given us what many people feel is like some kind of free pass to be kind of impenetrable or completely invulnerable to the living world, to the realities that most people around the world are faced with continually.
Yeah, I have to say, I have to watch. Just listening to both of you, like I'm just so deeply sort of, okay, I went away there. Just takes like all these different levels, and I think that's the thing about, as I've gone through the journal, I did it first by when I read all the questions, and now my next step is to go and do the questions. But I actually ended up getting drawn first to the home chapter.
Of course, yes.
And some of it's the time in my life, and I'm just very grateful for the questions that you put in there that make me even think about what is home. Because I think so often when I talk to people, they think about the structure, they think about the location, and your invitation for us to really dig in deeply and think about what is home, where am I home, who am I home? I mean, all these different pieces. So if you don't mind, tell me a little bit about that particular chapter, like how that came, why that was important to include it, and what you learned about yourself through it.
Well, I want to just read, Bell Hooks, hey, Bell, one of my mentors, whom I adore and owe so much to. We use one of her quotes at the beginning of that chapter, and I want to just read it because I think it really speaks to everything in this question. Now let's see if I can find it. At work, here we go, facing the screen. We have to have at home before this, right? Going outside.
No, it's at the end.
Okay, Lily knows all this so much better than I do. Okay, coming home. So here we go. So this is from Bell. African American people believed that the construction of a home place, however fragile and tenuous, had a radical dimension. One's home place was the one site where one could freely construct the issue of humanization, where one could resist. And for me, this question of home is always about how do I create a space in which, no matter where I am, I feel safe within my being. Even if I am unsafe physically, I have a place that I can live and dwell that I know is safe. And even having that in my psyche as a home place is my space of resistance, that within that peaceful mind, I can construct my own radical resistance. And so for me, I think being able to do that, to have the freedom of mind, that is home for me, wherever I am, I want to be grounded in that kind of mental clarity and stability and knowledge that, all of this is going to go, all of it can be taken, it can be, burned down. But what I can hold on to, that sacred site, that is my birthright, that is my being, from which all radical thought and resistance can come. That for me is home. Now, at the same time, my mother has really given me a lot about home and beauty and the relationship between beauty and how it sustains us. And so I think a lot about how my home needs to be a place of deep beauty, because that reminds me and gives me the will to continue. And that's a kind of aesthetic, soul infused beauty. You know what I mean? So also I'm holding that idea, you know. And so anyway, and so we really wanted people to start to think about that as we get so attached to, you know, the real estate market and what, you know, being houseless, you know, being, you know, what could we offer that would deepen our sense of being home and being grounded and being safe, sheltered, you know, and separating that from this story that it has to be one place or look like one thing, you know, because we think that really can give people a lot, you know. We hope.
And I love the question even about like helping people to explore losses of home.
Yes. Absolutely.
And so and that inviting that in, and when home becomes unsafe because of the larger political realities, I just thought it was such an important piece, and it landed for me at a time when I really was reevaluating home. And anyone that knows me, you know, I have an unnatural attachment to my home. And suddenly I'm able to think about new possibilities for home. So I just really want to thank y'all
well, you know, as
for the opportunity.
Yes, as Black people, home is very deep. You know, the land is deep. You know, we have been forced off of land. We have been denied access to land. We have been denied access to homes. We have been denied access to so many things. So for us, you know, it seems like a sort of obsessive relationship, and it often is. It comes from a real place, you know.
Yeah.
I don't want to when I'm talking about this place that exists outside of structures, I don't want to at all suggest that people who are not housed or who have been removed from housing should sort of get over it and just be able to live in their minds. No, it's a matter of being able to have a kind of stability of mind that is home, that can allow you to navigate and negotiate and make good decisions moving forward to get yourself into a space of home that is supportive in all the different ways, you know.
And to understand the external factors that decide that some people don't deserve home.
Exactly.
You know, that isn't about you at all, but really about a system that says that is not essential, that people should have it. So I think when you, in like all the different questions that you ask, allow people to take those layers. Before Lily, did you have anything you want to add to that piece of it?
I'll just touch on what you shared about loss, and to expand that to the other chapters. We really, you know, there's a whole, you can navigate the themes the book so many different ways. One of the ways that you can move through is using 5 different themes that are color coded through the book. And one of those themes is grief, loss, and the work of healing.
Yeah.
And, you know, loss and grief and the work of healing for me has been such a huge part of my own work. And so it was really like, to me, it was incredibly important that in each chapter we give space for people to start to approach that work, in part because it is so not normalized in our culture at all. And predominantly, it's really deeply rejected. And we mostly try to distance ourselves from dealing with loss and grief as much as we can. And yet we experience all different types of grief and loss all of the time. And so many of the kinds of griefs and, you know, losses that we experience are They're ongoing, they're continual, they're, racial micro and macro aggressions that people of color deal with, every day. They are, environmental degradation and losses that people have to deal with and face continually. Their loss of dreams, loss of stories that we've told about ourselves, who we thought we would become and never did. And so for me, looking at loss as a pathway into this work leads me to a place of opening, of saying, okay, something has died. I have lost something. There is now space for something else. There is now space for a new story to be born here. And so I just wanted to make sure that, we take the time to think about that as well. And you both, already explored that in this space of home, but it really is present in every chapter.
One of the things that I love how y'all start each chapter about giving us a little guidance about read the question. I feel like I have these two really loving presences, like holding my hand. It's okay to take a break. It's to breathe, and those reminders. And I found, as I was even just reading through, it was really important to kind of keep that with me, that this is questions that can be a lifetime of unfolding, but also can be explored in a way that lead us into a really fast and powerful transformative experience. And so I just wanted, as people think about, how they want to engage this book, and the thing that also occurs to me, I want to remind people that please, if you have questions, this is really a good time to put your questions in the little question thing, and I have one question that's waiting that I will get to. But please take a moment. We've got this space in our community, so please offer your questions.
Please, we love questions. They're the best.
We love questions. And so I'll go to this one question that's here now, and it's someone that says, as a Black woman with several chronic illnesses who's had to advocate for basic health care, what are the best ways to work on self-care?
Yes. Lily, you want to talk about self-care?
I'm so sorry. I got entranced by a question on the comments list. I need to, okay.
That comment.
What are the best ways to work on self-care? I got it. I found it. Okay. Well, so we actually have another one of our thematic tracks in the book. Let's see if I can open this here. Is self-care. And so as you move through, I'm going to show you what that looks like in 1 second here. So you can see these, and the pink one is self-care. And so as you move through the book, I don't know if you can see, but like this question here, for example, is specifically relating to self-care. And so we have cultivated a track that if you wanted to just specifically focus on these questions, whether they are in relationship to your body, to your, the people in your life, which a lot of those questions are around creating boundaries and, finding ways to tell a story about preserving your energy and taking care of yourself that places it, at center. All the way to, as Rebecca said, that final chapter of looking at our, reckoning with our mortality, at the ways that our bodies betray us. And I think that's often a sentiment that I've heard from friends who experience chronic illness, and really starting to dig into what does that story look like, and how can I deeply offer myself the space and the witnessing to write a story about the suffering and the pain that I experience, and then find new ways of storying that and taking direct action so that I can be the best space and container and kind of home for self-care as possible.
Yeah, and I think as a Black woman, I hear you out there advocating for yourself and for your health, and I really deeply understand, because I'm doing it, and my people in my family are doing it every day, and it's not easy work to do. As we're seeing with COVID, so many Black people are being, denied healthcare, denied, basic pain management medication, let alone all of the many different treatments and modalities that we deserve and that often white people are given just as a matter of course. So the intensity with which we have to advocate for ourselves in the space of healthcare in this country is unbelievable and exhausting and draining and often demoralizing. And so I really think that part of self-care in that is just, and I know you probably already know this, but part of self-care in that space is just really understanding how this system is designed to kill us, and how it has no intention of just offering us the medicine and the support and the care that we need, because our lives are not at the center of their priorities, and so when you understand that you are fighting that, you understand that every moment, every time you're able to get the care that you need, you are, a warrior. You are doing the work of 10,000 people. You are fighting the wave that is meant to knock you over. And so you must always, I think, and I do this, is really take strength in knowing that I understand the system. I am navigating that system. I refuse to let that system mow me down. And I'm modeling that for my child who's brown. And I am modeling that for others in my community. And just knowing that gives me a tremendous amount of pride, of self-worth, of a sense of I can prevail. I will persist. And I also think, obviously all of the different ways that, are just, you've heard a million times, take care of yourself, rest, don't push yourself too hard, eat healthily, reach out to your community. Don't think that asking for help is a sign of weakness, asking for help, inviting people to help you navigate these things is actually a sign of strength. No one is here alone. We didn't get here alone. Independent, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, taking care of yourself by yourself. That's just a story that is not helpful. Every single person is we are indiscreet. We are inseparable and interdependent. So, I think, know your own power, know what you're up against, go in there and get as much as you can and get what you need, ask for help, take care of yourself along the way, and know that you are loved. You are so loved, you are loved. You're being loved right now, because I can imagine how hard you're working with a chronic illness to try to get the kind of support you need. And I am right there with you. I'm far, but my spirit is with you. So I think that's important to remember, and I hope you can carry that with you. Okay, so
I want to add two other things to that quickly, and that is just to the power of finding communities of people of color who are also experiencing the same challenges and seeking pathways to, self-care and healing practices. Two that come to mind that I have that are, helmed by dear friends of mine. One is called Naya, and I'll put these in comments or in the chat, and the other is Dive In Well. And both are, sanctuaries for people of color, for Black women in particular. They're helmed by Black women that are offering practices and sanctuary for people who are, many of whom are experiencing these same challenges.
Well, thank you. People have responded to my request to have questions. So now we're going to take this last half an hour and go through some of these questions. We've got about 6 of them.
Great.
And so one of the questions is, how long do you think this book should take to complete? And do you recommend a certain pace?
I think this book could take a lifetime to complete. I think that we recommend that you you can answer one question a day, a week. You can do 10 in a month. You can, there's really no program. There are no rules. We want you to come to it, open it, feel some kind of connection with it, and follow that. I will say that, as someone who's very invested and very, I've thought a lot about story and the narrative arc, we have tried to design the chapters so that they begin somewhere, where you are, and then slowly lead you to a kind of epiphany or a cathartic experience that changes your mind in a certain way, and then allows you to dwell in that new space for a little bit. So while I think, we don't want you to feel like there are any rules, just know that each chapter is designed to move you through this process in a very organic way. But it could take you a year, it could take you a month. It's up to you, and you'll feel it. I think when you start to engage the questions, some questions, you can dwell on for days, and others are just very quick. So just, I think, be open. Lily,
don't be afraid to have the answer change entirely.
Yeah.
And I also think, it's so tempting to think, well, I don't even want to begin, because what if I write the wrong thing, or my answer, next week I feel differently, or in 2 years, get a new one.
Right.
I mean, it's fine. It doesn't have to be your final answer.
Thank you. And I have to say, it's such a beautiful book. It's like, I hate to write in it, but I will.
Yes, no, you must write in it. This is one of the things we are very
I know
about this, because we work hard to make it both beautiful and writable. We want people to write in it and not feel that it's too precious. Make it yours. Don't please.
Rebecca, I promise I will. The piece of it is this, because it's so beautiful, but our words and our stories deserve that kind of space.
And I think, woman, yes,
that deserves that kind of space.
Yeah.
And I love the reminder that, just like in therapy, the answers change. The deeper you go, the new information ought to change some answers. So don't be afraid to notice the growth arc either.
Yes.
Now, one of these questions, I love this question, which is, where did you get stuck in your process together, and how did you get to the other side?
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is that I actually think we work together incredibly symbiotically. That's part of, what does work. But often that means that, there are places where I am very detail oriented, and I can kind of get like blinders on, because I can just get fixated on certain things. And Rebecca is, and just to finish that, like, I get fixated. I'm a perfectionist. I just I want every single thing to be in its exact right place before, we move on to the next thing. And I feel that Rebecca has an incredible ability to really stay attuned to the broader picture and to move us forward in a way that, it helps to get us unstuck. But at the same time, those two perspectives, they don't always work together, because if there's something that I'm fixated on that I want, to make sure that we deal with, and Rebecca's like, let's just talk about this other thing, then it can be challenging.
And then what happens is we get a little bit like, and I'll get, a little testy, and Lily will make a face and just, but then we just move through it. I think we have a strong enough practice and enough trust, and we have worked together long enough that we know that we fundamentally believe in the same thing, and we fundamentally want the same thing. And and we know our idiosyncrasies, and we honor them. I think we give space to them. One of my challenges is, I can never get the freaking Zoom link set up in time, or I forget a lot of the details, and Lily, so graciously sends them to me and repeats things 100 times because I'll forget them, and doesn't make me feel bad about it, and just sort of understand that that's part of who I am, And so when Lily gets like this, and in her way, I also remember that it is that ability to be that way that has allowed us to stay on deadline, to get this thing done, to navigate many other spaces. So I think we have a healthy respect for what we each bring to the table, and that's very, very important. And we've worked it through for many years, so it's durable. Yeah. It's durable,
Mm-hmm.
So, great question.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah. One of the questions, the next question was, how do we get through this book, like when writer's block is real? So when you get stuck, you can't figure out like the right word, you're feeling sort of in that loop. Like, what are ways that someone can help move through this?
Well, I think one of the things that we hope the book will do is help people with writer's block. That it shouldn't be, we don't think of it as a book that it's actually perfect for writers who are really trying to write a book that they need to publish or want to publish or is on deadline, because it should be more spacious. It's more of an invitation to just write freely. It's not a book where you have to write it perfectly. It's just a book where you can draw pictures in response to the questions. This is a very low pressure environment, even though the questions are deep. So we're hoping that kind of spaciousness will really help the writer's block move on, or at least give you an alternative space in which to write that doesn't have the same kind of pressure and expectation, and then hopefully that will open something that will allow you to return to the other work with a sense of freedom and openness and joy, or ease, a greater sense of ease. So I think in that way, we hope the book will help with writer's block. Don't you think, Lily?
Absolutely. And I also think, even though, as you said, we absolutely want people to be writing in the book.
Yeah.
I also think it's okay to open the book, look at a question, and sit with that question for a day.
Mm-hmm.
Let it just become a part of the landscape of your mind for a few hours or a while, and see what comes.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be any one thing. It could be, that it opens up a space in your mind that becomes something completely different.
Yes, for sure.
And I'll direct, and that's where I think that sort of the beginning, the reminder at the beginning of every chapter about how the supportive ways to engage it. Step away, take a breath, sit with it. It's an unfolding, it's a rewriting, and so the next word might not be there yet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And because we really do, like, often Rebecca and I would just, we went through each of these questions. I mean, so many times you cannot believe. And sometimes we would say a question to one another and we would just start laughing because they are so intense. They're very intense questions. And we understand that. We know that it's not like you're just going to breeze through this and, and be fine. It's like, if you powered through this whole thing in a day, send us a picture.
Don't think it's possible, but send us a picture. And I think that's the other part about it, is like, this is a book that does invite a little bit of putting down, walking away, thinking about it, and coming back. And I think I have to say, as a therapist, I so appreciate this book, because I confess to cringing every time someone comes in with the newest self-help book, even when it's a great book, because once again, it directs that attention away from you. If someone else's thought, someone else's assessment, and the power of this book is that only you know the right answer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right answer, whatever that means. And so that ability to be able to say, like, what you think, what you've learned through your life journey matters most.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. Beautiful. Oh, I'm so glad.
I
Yeah.
think we're in an era where we want answers. You know, everyone wants answers, and social media feeds us answers continually that are, you know, these easily consumable ideas that are meant to go viral. And it's interesting to be in the, you know, it's like we're in the business of questions, not answers.
Mhm. Exactly.
And you actually have a beautiful quote from Wilma Mankiller. We must trust our own thinking, trust where we are going, and get the job done.
Exactly.
And I think that message is so critical right now, especially when you're a member of a marginalized community where we're constantly asked to look for other people's wisdom. And so to have a book that says, we want to know very deeply what you're thinking, what matters to you, and to remind you what shaped you. A friend of mine offered me what she calls them three magical questions. What happened? What happened? How's what happened to you affect you now? And what do you need to heal? This is a woman, Pamani Elbert, shared of her tradition. And I thought, well, I could quit as a therapist if people could really have safe space to explore those three questions. My work here is done. And so to have a book where there's so many different levels that help guide and support. And the one thing I know is that there is a book club group that's on here now from Alabama. And so the part about working with others on this book.
yes. I
say
love
what you think about it.
I think that sounds fantastic. I mean, I don't know that we've talked a lot. Well, well, Lily, you talk about that. I mean, when I think about it right now, I mean, obviously we did think about creating the book so that people who left the workshop and the masterclass could have a space where they could continue to do work. And we wanted to build What's Your Story as a community because we felt that there was so much power in people telling their stories and being witnessed, you know, in the telling, and then being reflected back and being held in all of the difficult moments of the telling. Actually, that is foundational. You know, that's foundational to the work, to be together in community. And so that's really wonderful to hear. I think one of the reasons that we did do this book, as I've just said, is that at a certain point I realized I could not teach enough people. I wanted to, but I could, you know, there's just no way. So to be able to have something that could stand in, that could hold for many people was the vision. So for people to do it together, it's like people are creating our work together on their own in their world. So we love that idea.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think there's a way in which, especially given our distance with the pandemic, our reliance on technology right now for, you know, the approximation of closeness, to share these kinds of questions with each other, to be finding these like deep new avenues of communication and understanding. To me, that is the best way that we could approach each other right now, is to come together with questions that will allow us to feel seen and heard and held together and by each other. I'm thinking of there's an exercise that I came to through this beautiful journalist, Noor Tagore, and she talks about using it at speaking engagements called If You Really Knew Me, You Would Know. And she allows people from the audience to just fill in the blank of that sentence. If you really knew me, you would know. And then passes all of those slips of paper up to the front and reads them. You know, she reads from the audience each person's feeling. If you really knew me, you would know. And I think that these, you know, and you can imagine it becomes this unbelievable unfolding of human vulnerability, and just how common it is for each of us to feel so separate and afraid from each other, of each other, and judged by each other. And yet the commonality is that we all feel that way. And so using these questions as a bridge to connect with one another, to get to those spaces of vulnerability and those places of real truth telling. I'm really heartened by that. So thank you all who are out there doing that.
Yeah, we love it. And also what you're doing when you're doing that is you're actually rewriting a story of community. You know, as you are using the book to build community together, you're writing a new story of togetherness, and that is extremely moving to me, and that's our dream. So so thank you for doing that work, and thank you for letting us into that precious space of vulnerability and openness and moving forward. You know, I'm honored.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We got a couple more questions, about 15 minutes left. And so the next question is, the themes in the book remind me of my 4-step work in Al-Anon. One of my children is in recovery. Is there any overlap you've seen in participants or in discussions between this book and 12-step recovery work?
4th step is amends. Which one is 4th step? We don't know.
Yeah.
I think 4th step is amends. Somebody has to tell us, because we won't know how to answer. The themes in the book remind me of my 4th step work. Okay, well, I'm glad one of your kids is in recovery. Yay for recovery, if they needed it. And they needed it, and I'm sure, you know. Okay, personal moral inventory. Okay, 4th step is doing an inventory of self. Absolutely, there's some overlap there. I think that that, you know, the 12-step program is so incredibly important and it has been accessible and helpful for so many people. And I do think that it is a kind of sequenced process of self-evaluation in an attempt to rewrite one story, in an attempt to understand the thoughts and the actions and the belief systems that one was given, and which have been keeping one from really becoming the human being they want to become, and making room for them to be liberated from that, and see what else is there for them, see what their life should have been, could have been, and try to move forward into that. So I think the 12-step program is very, there is some overlap there. I wouldn't say, yes, I mean, you know, this is all work that we're all doing in different ways, you know. So yes is the answer. There is some overlap. And I do think we've seen participants come in and you know, who've done recovery work and talk about that. But I also think this is outside of that structure, and so it appeals to, sometimes it appeals to people who've moved through that structure already, or who want to have a kind of a different way into that work that feels a little more organic to them. You know, like the Buddha says that we have so many sutras because everybody's mind is different and can hear things differently. And so I think that our work is an offering that speaks to the minds that it moves, you know, but definitely some overlap.
You know, and the other part of it is, I think all the different places, like, I think life is, I always tell people, relationships in life are great healing spaces when they're not hurting you. And joy is a really good, is that the questions that invite us just to examine our life without a lot of criticism, without a lot of pathologizing of where we're at, is just like really being able to say, what are the things that have shaped me? Yes. Some that have hurt me, but also the ones, it's coming to your question, like how you started out, Rebecca, saying, like, we want joy. Like joy is good. Like laughing. I know my therapy is going well when people are not only just crying, but they're laughing. And
Yeah.
so to be able to have questions where there are what brings you pleasure, joy, those are very good healing questions.
Yes. Yes. And we definitely try to ask a lot of those. What
Yeah.
makes your heart sing? What makes your body feel good? How do you feel after sex? How do you want to feel after sex? Everything.
Mhm,
What feel good? We want that. We want to pay attention to that. I think so many people forget to pay attention to what makes them feel good, and then they don't, make that a habit, returning to what
mhm.
feels good. So, yes.
Um,
Um,
yeah.
Go, Lily. Okay.
There was a question that disappeared that was about uh, grief.
Grief? Yes,
Oh, yeah.
And I just want to make sure that I am. Here we go.
I brought it
Oh,
back.
it was, yes, some specific
Specific.
writings on grief and loss, and
Mhm,
then also posting the link for
right.
Rebecca's class in March. So yes, my first book is a book about healing from grief and loss. It's called Kale and Caramel: Recipes for Body, Heart, and Table. And it charts the trajectory of my healing from the loss of my mother, and also working with aromatic herbs and flowers, which was a legacy that Vanessa and I talked a little bit about before we came on. My mother was an herbalist and an aromatherapist. And so the book actually looks at this intersection of how we work with plants, and in our healing processes, as well as in the ways that we nourish our bodies inside and out. And I've also written a lot of just other articles and spoken on many different podcasts and all of that about grief and loss. If you look on my website, you can find all of that. It's just lilydiamond.com. You can access all of those articles, all the podcasts. And then there's also a specific page on my site about grief and loss that you can tap into as well.
Thank you.
And I'm just,
Um,
link and all of that in the chat. Oh,
okay.
good. Our fabulous AARL librarians. Hands
Okay.
like, okay.
Everybody should have them do. I mean, it's like amazing. It's so hard not to just start wanting to link onto the things that they're posting.
Yeah.
So thank you so
It's
much,
amazing.
Renee.
Right. Stay.
Well, the last question that we have right now is someone who had missed that was asking, are there questions in the book directly about race? This is a person that has a project that works on race story rewrite project, and that's exactly what they're talking about. So they're just wondering about how you would address creating new stories about race.
Yes. New stories about race. We are really trying to do that even right now as we work together. We are trying to create new stories about race. It is not easy, but trying to really be honest about the history and trying to work through, the knots and the moments of discomfort and dis-ease, and trying to hold one another accountable to our projections. I think that we definitely are doing that in our own collaboration. And I think you can see that woven through the book, as we ask questions about which people in your community are marginalized. Are you marginalized? Which voices are marginalized? Who are the people who lived on this land before you? How do you feel about them? What do you believe you owe communities around you? What do you believe they owe you? What kind of solidarity do you want to be in with other communities? I mean, I think that we are always throughout the book talking about race in one way or another, and about white supremacy in one way or another, and about, hegemony in one way or another. It's all about questioning those things that we have come to expect as the American narrative. And so I think that at times in the book it's explicit, and at times it is implicit. So yes, I think it could be a great resource for any work that you're doing, and we would love to support the work that you're doing as well. Do you agree, Lily?
Absolutely. And it's actually the first, in the introduction, it's the first example that we give of a narrative of a story that, we carry culturally and individually, is the story of race, the story of whiteness, and what it means to carry that. And so really we start the whole book on that note of saying, let's look at this defining story that we are all carrying at this moment, and all the moments that have come before, and how has it limited us, how has it kept us small, and how do we write a new story? So yeah, it's bedrock to all the rest that comes.
Yeah, couldn't do it without that.
We've got about 5 minutes left, and I want to actually go to the end of your book, which is the letting go.
Oh yeah.
And can you tell me a little, because and if I could read the quotes that's there. Remember, every day is an awakening. Every day is a new story. Every day is the beginning, the middle, and the end. Use these final pages to get to the heart of your own freedom.
Ooh, did we write that?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think y'all did. I think that's your word.
Absolutely.
So, letting go. So all this exploration, lifetime of work.
That's very beautiful. I'm glad you brought us there. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's a big idea. That's a big idea. That's something that's very important to me, because I think that it's so important that we remember that these are all stories, and we can tell them over and over again. Every human being on this planet has been telling stories to try to make sense of our lives, and to give ourselves meaning, and to make sense of this mystery. And at the same time, we are actually bigger than our stories. Our minds are bigger than our stories. Our beings are bigger than our stories. And so even if you've written the most perfect, beautiful story, ultimately, for me, the goal is to let go of that story so that you can really be free of all the stories, because as long as you are, kind of limited to one story, even if it's gorgeous, there's a way in which you're not completely free, beyond the space of words. And I like to tell the story of one of my teachers once told me, that again, and this goes into a kind of other spiritual, whatever we want to call it, space, but it speaks to me, that your mind is vast, like the sky, and the stars in the sky are like ideas, so in your mind it's vast, and you have all these ideas, and they're like the stars, right? But so you have all these great ideas, they're like the stars, but the real potential, the vastness, the space that does not have any ideas, is where we have the most creativity, that dark matter, that open space that is full of potential and that is open, that's the space that we want to have access to as much as possible, because that's where so much is going to be born. So if you're too fixated on the story or the ideas, no matter how beautiful that star is, you can rob yourself of the great beauty that is in the emptiness. So that section, that letting go, it seems kind of ironic, it seems, it's like here we have really led you to write this story. And yet at the end, it's about letting go of the story, because at the moment of letting go, the story is not important anymore, So, and that's that. I'm so glad you brought that up.
I love that.
And it was important to us, that people are so, especially those who are kind of doggedly going through the book and really completing each section and each question, to come to the end and to see that now there are no questions. There's just space for you to write. And there are these, I think it's like 20 some blank pages for you to truly just be with whatever story, is now you and your in your liberated space, in your liberated state of having acknowledged all that came before, all that is with you now in this moment, and whatever might be to come.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm sitting here, so Rebecca, I have to tell you this. I'm taking my book, because I read through it, and now I got to go right through it. And the one place I'm going to take it to write through it is my little cabin in Eatonton, Georgia.
Oh. I'm
Yeah.
so
My most magical sacred space. And so this for me is really a coming full circle. I just turned 60. Y'all don't know how right on time this book was for me.
Oh.
And
Wow.
and so I'm just so grateful to both of you for your time, for your wisdom, for your heart. And I know that this is going to be an important book for a lot of people, and I wish you lots of opportunities to share more about your work, and also a lot of prosperity in people purchasing your book, which you also may purchase at the little link at the bottom of this page. Do y'all have any last thing you want to say before we wrap up? Anything we hadn't said that you have full in your heart to say?
Well, I just want to thank you for your just beauty and power and clarity and just wisdom, you know. And I'm so glad that you are there working as a therapist and a healer for all of us, because you know, each one heal one, and everyone that you can help to get forward, you know, you help the rest of us. And I know it's not easy. And so I'm so grateful for you and for being such an incredible moderator and conversation compatriot here tonight, you know. And I can't wait to meet you. And I hope I meet you in Eatonton one day. You know, we're spending a lot more time there. We're so happy to be sort of moving back to our ancestral home in a way, you know, little by little. I want to thank, you know, this beautiful bookstore, this beautiful community. You know, I want to thank all of you who are here writing on this incredible chat. I want to thank my beautiful co-author, Lily. I mean, I'm just so happy. This has been really beautiful, really.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vanessa and ER and Karis. And everyone here. It's incredibly beautiful to be with you this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Also, teach and remove.
Amen.
Yes.
Yes.
I want